Hi, I'm Larry Castle here with Ken Brown for episode 101 of That's a Good Question. What's going on in Trumpworld? Well, welcome back, and it's been a month since our last episode. The last one was our 100th episode, and we noted at that point that we're going to switch from a weekly to a monthly publishing schedule, and so we've done that. So it's been a month. The bad news is, with that long gap, there can be a lot to cover, and so that's definitely the case over the last month. There's no way we'll get to everything we might talk about in this episode, but we will be talking about a number of current events. And as always, I remind you that things like current events and politics being covered on a podcast featuring two pastors, why do we do that? Well, we live in a time where there is so much misinformation and disinformation, and you've recently helpfully pointed out the difference. Misinformation, things that are simply false, disinformation, things that are intentionally misrepresented. No. And we live in a time with so much of both of those that it's easy to get confused, to follow misleading claims, maybe even to find ourselves promoting these kinds of things that hurt our credibility. And this is a real problem for us because we're people whose mission it is to spread the truth of the good news of Jesus Christ. So we care about it for that reason. We also care about it because we care about our nation's institutions. We want them to be stable, and we don't want them to be unnecessarily disrupted because we want to live quiet and peaceable lives, as we've pointed out, which is our mission, or to carry out our mission, rather. The quiet and peaceable isn't our mission, but it aids our mission. So we've noted that from 1 Timothy 2. And that's the reason we take the time each month to reflect on and comment on current events. So let's get to that now. In our last episode, we talked about it. It aired the very week that the FBI searched the former President Donald Trump's home in Florida. And they had a subpoena to confiscate documents that the president had, but which belonged to the government. Some of them classified at a really high level.
Yeah, and just it's been these several weeks since that happened then. And so much, just about every day, every other day, some news related to that coming out. And part of that is because there have been so many differing explanations for what happened.
It's hard to keep up.
It is, yeah. So, the FBI planted these documents. So that was kind of floated and most of these only get about a 24-hour news cycle.
If that, Yeah,
so
it's kind of like until we find out what more they have on us.
Yes.
We'll only give this much of an explanation.
And then we have to change to something else, Or the stuff wasn't classified, or former President Trump, declassified it on the way out the door, which even his...
By virtue of carrying it out.
If it leaves, I had a standing rule that if it leaves and I take it home, it's declassified.
Before that, sorry, I'm just trying to distinguish. Before that, wasn't it just that they had been declassified, and then when that was kind of nitpicked, it was, there was a standing order. The standing order wasn't initially.
Yeah, that's correct.
Claimed, right?
Yeah, and so what process did we go through? Well, we didn't need a process because we had this thing that was just whenever I do it, it was a standing order. And, even his former Attorney General, Bill Barr, said this past week, I'm not sure what's more irresponsible, taking this stuff or actually just kind of standing over a bunch of boxes and saying, I hereby declassify all the stuff and I don't even know what's in it. Because when something becomes declassified, that means it's not just the purview now of the president. It can be seen by anybody.
By me.
But if you happen to get a chance to look at it. And it's at Mar-a-Lago, for heaven's sake, where a lot of people come in and out. So, it was planted. It was not classified to begin with. I declassified it. It's mine to begin with, so it's none of your business, which is most definitely not true. There are no nuclear information out there. That came out several weeks ago in a news report, and the former president denied there was any nuclear information. Well, now another report has come out saying there most definitely is. Now, it's a report, so I'll caution to add that. But they're not denying it. In fact, quite the contrary. The Trump people are going out and saying, okay, now you guys are leaking stuff. And let me just warn everyone, as we did a month ago. Now, it's been a month ago, so I don't expect anybody to remember, but I tried to say, keep your eye on the ball, keep your eye on the facts, as this story and any story like this, because there are all these attempts to distract. Hey, look over here, look at this. Things that are not the main focus, they're not necessarily germane. And one way to do that is to just remember, I said a month ago, if you have the facts on your side, argue the facts. If you have the law, argue the law. If you don't have either one, blame the prosecutor.
Yeah.
So one way to do that is to say, hey, they're being unethical in what they're doing. They're leaking stuff. Well, the fact that something got leaked to a reporter doesn't tell you who leaked it. And I'm just warning, don't jump to conclusions about who did that. Because think about this. The president knows what was in those documents. He knows if there was nuclear stuff, and he knows now they have it. And if that's likely to come out, it might benefit him to get out in front of that. It might benefit his side to leak it. No, I'm not saying they did the leak. I don't know who did the leak.
There's some indication that that's happened in the past on different items.
Exactly.
Right.
And then, it's under different administrations. Those of us who don't do this day by day, we're not involved in the politics. We're not involved in trying to position ourselves, for messaging and all of that. Then we don't think that way. We just think that obviously it must be, why would Trump leak it if it makes Trump look bad? Well, there are reasons you want to get the making you look bad out there.
If you're going to look bad anyway.
If you're going to look bad anyway. Yeah, exactly. So don't get distracted. Focus on the facts. Focus on the court documents, all of that. Now, with this, Trump, interestingly, asked for a different judge than the one who was presiding over, the one who signed the subpoena to begin with and allowed the FBI to go in and to get these documents. He asked for a different judge, and he asked for a different judge to do a different thing, namely to assign what we all have learned is called a special master. That's a new term for most of us. But the special master would have the task of getting all of these documents that are now in the possession of the Justice Department, and the special master would sort through all of them and decide what investigators can keep and what they can't. And because this stuff much of it is so highly classified, top secret, then whoever does that's going to have a security clearance to be able to do it.
This is in part so that people who are involved in the process otherwise, who don't have a clearance, don't inadvertently or in an unauthorized way see those top secret items.
When these documents get back to the Department of Justice like they did, one of the first things they have to do is, if they have reason to believe that they have classified documents, they have to get them in front of the eyes of people who have clearance to see them. So it can't just be to any clerk in the Justice Department. But
there's a lot of documents.
But this is routine. That they seize documents from places all the time, and they take them back and they put them in a room, and they have what's called a taint team go through them to find out what's tainted and therefore needs to be exempted from what we can have. What is attorney-client privilege?
I see.
If it's attorney-client privilege, it's got to go back.
So not just things that require clearance, but other things that may be prejudicial.
And in this case, because there are classified documents, the people on that taint team also have to be people who have a security clearance. So they're doing, and so this, for example, is how they found the passports. I don't know if you remember that. It was in the news. There were a couple of Trump's personal passports that have been returned to him. He tried to make a deal out of that. Look at that. They took my passports. Well, when they go in with a subpoena, they don't at the house sort through everything. They put things in a box. They take them back and they do the sorting there. So the sorting has already started weeks ago. But now the Trump people are saying, we want a special master to be the person who goes through that. Now, if nothing else, that delays it. That delays it till past the midterms, at least. I suppose another possible advantage for the Trump side would be, depending on who you get appointed as a special master, are they going to play games with it for you and keep documents away from the Justice Department and say, no, you can't see those. Those belong to the, I suppose it doesn't hurt to try. But there's a judge now, a different judge, who is who's making that happen and requiring that, at least so far, unless she changes her mind. Most legal experts that I have been reading about this are amazed that this was requested, and they are amazed that the judge is even entertaining it.
That was going to be my next question, because it's not an unheard of thing, it sounds like. I mean, there's a name for it. It's a thing already.
Yeah. But in this case, they already have the documents. They've had them for weeks.
And have already gone through a lot of them.
That's right. So if this was going to happen, it should have been done by the judge who was overseeing it. So a number of unusual things here. One was shopping for a new judge. And then that new judge saying, okay, I'll go along with this. Most lawyers are saying, that I'm reading, are saying that this ruling is atrocious. This judge is relatively new to the bench, having been appointed by Trump in December of 2020. Now, what's important about December of 2020? He is a lame duck president. He has lost the election at this point. He's still appointing people, and the Senate still confirmed her to the bench during that time. So she hasn't been a judge for very long. We'll see her again later in this episode about another matter, this same judge. So the government's going to appeal that this judge has said there needs to be the special master to a group of 11 judges on the Court of Appeals. And we'll see what they decide, and presumably they'll do that fairly quick. Trump and his people really want to, though. And this is what I would encourage you to focus on. Not all of the sideshow stuff, but the fact that Trump and his people really want to hang on to, really have wanted to hide some very top secret stuff, including, again, reportedly, of the nuclear program for a foreign country. And remember this, that this attempt, we know this from documents that have been filed in court already, that this attempt to get these documents has gone on for 18 months, with Trump's attorney actually signing off at one point a few months ago saying, hey, I've looked through everything. You guys have everything that you're supposed to have. And then they find out, the FBI, finds out, has reason to believe there are still things there despite the representation by the attorney, gets a subpoena from the judge, and then goes in and gets it. And so bear all of that in mind. Bear in mind as well that Trump is being treated better. You know, I know that he wants to kind of act like he's being victimized. I've heard people go on
TV and say, you know, why isn't there equal justice? And which is really just laughable.
Yeah. He's being treated better, not worse. Yeah, and I personally don't have a huge problem with that within reason, given his position and out of respect and all of that. But let's just be clear here that if this was anybody else, they would be in handcuffs already. Okay, and that's not hyperbole. That is the truth.
I've seen several folks commenting on it, list examples.
Yeah, exactly. And we did a month ago. I talked about a few of them. So why does he have this stuff? What has he done with it? What did he want to do with it? And these are the kind of questions that I'm encouraging you to ask about this. Don't get distracted by the sideshow and, dangling red herrings. Ask yourself, why doesn't he tell us why he has this stuff? Why doesn't he tell us what he's done with it or what he planned to do with it? Why don't the right-wing media, who interview him every now and then, ask him these kinds of questions?
Well, I've heard the explanation. It's just everybody takes work home with them.
I'm sorry.
And apparently there wasn't enough there for the friendly media to push back on.
This is true. This is true.
This related to that, this talk of classified documents kind of gives me flashbacks to ordeal with Hillary Clinton, right? Her problems with classified documents. Lots of folks pointing to this and saying this is the same thing, right? Which to me seems like that you don't want to say that because we all want her to go to jail, right?
We were really, I was very eager for her to be held accountable for that. And you were too, and probably most of our viewers were as well, Yeah, remember she used a personal server at her house for some of her work as Secretary of State. She was Secretary of State under Obama. And she had this thing set up at home. This is weird that she had that. It's not right. When it was discovered, it raised all kinds of flags for all of us, and certainly for me. Now, so what was on what was on those. That's why are you not going through the normal process of the State Department and, all of that. So the FBI director in 2016 looked into it. That was James Comey, at the time. And you may remember that I think it was July 5 of 2016, he holds his press conference, and we've all been waiting for this. And I remember listening to it. And he's going through, and he takes a long time with his preamble about all the stuff they looked into and what they found. And you're just waiting. Okay, so therefore, we have indicted her, or we're calling a grand jury to look into this or something, right? No, he says she was, quote, extremely careless in her handling of the documents. And he also noted that a very few, had markings that indicated the word classified with a small c next to a paragraph, but they had no header on them, these emails that said classified, so that you would, if you don't know it, that it's classified or it has a C down in the body until you actually start reading it. But remember, he declined to charge her, which he could have done. But he didn't think he would win under those circumstances. I don't know. But the mere charge during that political campaign would have been explosive. But he also reopened the case. Do you remember that? He reopened the case just 2 weeks before the election, helping Trump immensely. So this, I think, puts the lie decisively to the idea that the FBI was out to hurt Trump. If anybody was hurt by investigations by the FBI in the 2016 election, it was her. We learned later, in March of 2017, we learned that the FBI, while all that was going on, they had an open investigation that started in July of 2016 into the Trump campaign and their contacts with Russia.
Yeah, we talked about this in a couple of episodes as well.
Yeah, and we, the public, don't learn about it until March of 2017.
After it could, at the point where it wouldn't do damage.
So if they want to hurt him, all they have to do is leak that, and nobody leaked that, and nobody knew anything about that. So what most people, though, do not know about the whole Hillary, what about her and what she did with her emails on that server. What most do not know is that after Trump came to office, his own administration did 2 separate investigations into her emails on that private server. One of those was overseen by his first Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, and his investigation included, I'm quoting now, at the end of the process on January 29th, 2017, the Tiller State Department agreed there was no classified material, but found that her use of a personal email server itself was a security violation. With respect to any particular email, though, there was no violation, and that she had, quote, no individual culpability for any email security violations.
Does that mean she kind of asked for this access but didn't oversee whether it was set up properly or that kind of thing?
Yeah. And so she shouldn't have asked for it. She shouldn't have had, a private server in
deviated from normal security protocol.
That's right. But they didn't find that any danger came out of that. And then the next Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, did another investigation in 2019 and said a typical security violation involves pre-marked classified information. None of the emails at issue in this review were marked as classified. That's a quote. The department had found that Secretary Clinton did not, quote, bear any individual culpability. And those letters from the State Department to Hillary Clinton's attorneys after they did this investigation, those are available to you. You can email me. I'll be happy to share them for you. So these are letters on State Department letterhead with their conclusions. So she was extremely careless. She used a home server. One wonders why. What is it? I wonder what was she hiding? But you had 2 investigations by the Trump administration that exonerated her.
When you say what was she hiding, so she was trying to have some interactions that weren't monitored as closely? Is that what that means?
They definitely weren't monitored as closely. That's why they were outside of the State Department.
So communications that should be, official communications that should be monitored but weren't being.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, so it's a huge problem. And, this is the Trump State Department twice looking into it and exonerating her. I still have questions about that. But That's as far as I can go with it. And that's after Comey had already determined, look, no reasonable prosecutor could bring a case on this. That was the way he phrased it, no reasonable prosecutor. Now, here's something to note, though. Whatever was going on with that, and as crazy it is that she would have the server in her house and everybody faults her for that, this happened while she was still in government. Mm-hmm. I mean, this was while she was doing work for the government. This wasn't after she got out of the government. Mm-hmm. She then had a server in her house with government stuff on it.
Right.
These are two different things we're talking about here. Trump has nuclear secrets. Mm. At his house, he's no longer in the government. For what? Why not just give it back? Again, that raises the question, like it did for me when I learned that she had her own server. What is being hidden?
Yeah. He's been accused since before becoming president in 2016 of colluding with foreign governments, most infamously Russia.
Yeah.
And he sees this kind of all as a piece as he presents this narrative that he's been unmercifully and unfairly hounded. Starts with the Russia investigation, moves to the Ukraine phone call impeachment, and then final impeachment attempt for his involvement in the Capitol riot, the January 6th riot.
So the Russia investigation is, as we've said a number of times, and I just feel like you have to remind people because I still hear it almost every day. I read it, hear it somehow. The Russia investigation is considered by many Trump supporters as the original sin that gives rise to all others. Mm-hmm. They all have in common, Trump is the victim of bad actors who've been and remain out to get him. And it all started with the Trump-Russia hoax. And he and his people have masterfully, but frankly deceptively, played that narrative with amazing success. Any accusation now and subsequent to the Russia investigations is just dismissed as more Russia hoax type stuff. In an attempt to prove the conspiracy against him, he filed a suit. Now get this, and I guarantee you no one listening to us knows this, that he filed a suit against Hillary Clinton and her alleged co-conspirators. People like James Comey at the FBI, Andrew McCabe of the FBI, Peter Strzok of the FBI, Lisa Page, who used to be with the FBI, Kevin Kleinschmidt, Bruce Orr, and they're not household names. But get this, just 2 days ago, the judge in that case ruled.
So I'm one of those people.
What did
I've not
tell
heard
you?
Of
Exactly.
This, and that seems like a really big
Doesn't
deal.
it? Yeah. That President Trump, former President Trump, sued Hillary Clinton and sued all of these other people, and it was a total of about 50 people.
People in his FBI.
People in this is true. People that were in his. Now that doesn't mean he appointed all those people, but they were people that were in his Department of Justice. That's true. But about 50 people that he went after, and then Hillary Clinton obviously wasn't in his FBI. So these were just people that he believed were part of this big conspiracy. Well, we haven't heard about it. And you say, that seems like a big deal. Why haven't I heard it? Well, the Queen has died in the meantime, and maybe we'll talk about the Queen in the next episode, because we probably won't have time today. But just like those Trump administration investigations that the State Department did, that none of us really heard about, that cleared Clinton, most of us knew nothing of that. This suit that Trump filed is real, with court documents to prove it, and it was just decided this week. It was filed in March of this year, and just 2 days ago was decided. Trump said through his attorney to the court, I'm quoting now, the defendants blinded, so this is Trump talking through his attorney, the defendants. Who are the defendants? That's the 50 people that he's going after. Blinded by political ambition, orchestrated a malicious conspiracy to disseminate patently false, I know.
I'm sorry, I'm just here trying to picture former President Trump telling us somebody else is blinded by political ambition.
Oh, sure. Disseminating patently false and injurious information, too.
Yes, okay, go ahead.
Yes, exactly. And so They are blinded by ambition, orchestrated this malicious conspiracy to disseminate patently false and injurious information about Donald J. Trump and his campaign, all in the hopes of destroying his life, his political career, and rigging the 2016 presidential election in favor of Hillary Clinton. That is, quote, that was what was in the complaint. Now, many of our listeners might be thinking, yeah, that's exactly what they did. I hear it all the time on Fox and other places, but I didn't know the court had decided. I wonder why. I wonder why, and you should wonder why. You haven't heard that in the last 2 days, that case was decided. Perhaps it's because the ruling was not favorable for Trump, to put it mildly.
Okay.
The judge said, quote, the plaintiffs, now the plaintiff, that would be Trump, the plaintiff's theory of this case is difficult to summarize in a concise and cohesive manner. It was certainly not presented that way.
Ouch.
Oh, wow. Nevertheless, this is the judge talking, I will attempt to distill it here. Okay, that's page 3.
I hate to admit this, but I've had grades returned to me with comments like that on it. That's thankfully not recently.
That's page 3 of 65 pages.
Okay.
It goes down, it gets worse from
Ouch.
there. Plaintiff alleges that the defendants acted in concert, maliciously conspired to weave a false narrative that their Republican opponent, Donald J. Trump, was colluding with a hostile foreign sovereignty. That would be Russia. And it's not false. His campaign did have dozens of contacts with Russians, including those they thought were part of the Russian government, to get help in getting Trump elected. And I just say to you again, if you keep saying hoax, hoax, and believing the people who say that, I can't recommend highly enough, read the Mueller report. As a result of, now this is going on in the decision, quote, fraudulent evidence, the FBI commenced, quote, several large-scale investigations which were, quote, prolonged and exacerbated by the presence of a small faction of Clinton loyalists who were well-positioned within the Department of Justice. Okay, so that's what Trump, through his lawyers, said. The judge's decision says, defendants now move to dismiss the complaint as a series of disconnected political disputes that plaintiff, Trump, has alchemized into a sweeping conspiracy among the many individuals plaintiff believes to have aggrieved him.
Alchemized.
This is the judge. Now, they argue that the dismissal is warranted because plaintiff's claims fail on the merits, quote, in multiple respects. And they view it, hear this now, whatever the utilities of the complaint, as a fundraising tool, a press release, or a list of political grievances, it has no merit as a lawsuit. And then the judge says this, I agree.
Ouch.
Okay. That's right at the beginning. And then the judge concludes after 65 pages, the complaint fails to show that the investigation against the plaintiff suffered from an absence of probable cause. In other words, that the investigation into the Russia contacts and all of that it didn't have a probable cause. He fails to show that, the judge is saying. Indeed, the Inspector General report cited by plaintiff compels the opposite conclusion. In it, the Department of Justice Inspector General concluded the FBI operated Crossfire Hurricane. That's the investigation into Russia and Trump initially by the FBI. They operated Crossfire Hurricane, quote, for an authorized purpose, and, quote, with adequate factual predication that had nothing to do with any defendant, nothing to do with Comey, nothing to do with Hillary Clinton, nothing to do with any of these people you're coming after. Further, the Inspector General report specifically explained that the investigation was not predicated on Democratic National Committee information or the Steele dossier. But on a tip from a friendly foreign government. We know that government to be Australia. And of course, plaintiff is free to disagree with the conclusions of the Inspector General's report. But as I, the judge, have already cautioned, he may not misrepresent it in a pleading. And he certainly may not misconstrue it in an attempt to offer support for this ill-fated claim. Case dismissed. Okay.
Ouch. Do they call that getting your hat handed to you?
Totally. And get this. Remember I said at the beginning that we'd come back to the judge who last week said, now I want this special master, despite every lawyer I can find saying, why are we doing this? So this judge is the one that Trump's people wanted specifically to determine that special master thing. Well, I also said that Trump's people finagled to get that issue before her specifically. Well, in this case too, this one that was filed in March and was just dismissed 2 days ago, they sought a different judge than the original judge, than the one that I was just quoting. They wanted a different judge. And they had one in particular in mind, the judge in the special master case.
Really?
Her name's Aileen Cannon. Again, I said she was appointed by Trump in December of 2020, and apparently he thinks she'll provide favorable rulings for him.
I'll avoid doing what you've cautioned us against doing, but that's really fishy.
Isn't it? I mean, it's that, and that's what
I did it. I apologize. I did it anyways, and I shouldn't have done that.
No. No, wait. I think it's perfectly legitimate for anybody to say, like I did about Hillary Clinton, oh yeah, that's really fishy that you've got this server in your house. It is. I just don't know what to do with it after you've had multiple investigations into it. Okay? So I think it's perfectly legitimate to say, wow, that doesn't pass the smell test. Wow, that doesn't look right. That's different than drawing a firm conclusion and going around and telling people that, so I don't know what this judge, I want to give this judge the benefit of the doubt, as do you. But why are the Trump people trying to get her, not one, but in now 2 cases, they want her to rule. And in one of the 2, it did come before her. And in that one, she did rule in their favor, contra what everybody else I can read says. Yeah, that is fishy. It's okay to say that. I don't know her motives, and I'll leave it at that. Unfortunately for Trump, even though he tried to get the venue changed to her in this case that was just dismissed, that change of venue was denied. The judge in the case that had that harsh language intimated that the lawyers who brought that case on Trump's behalf might be ripe for discipline because that complaint was so frivolous and it was a waste of the court's time and resources. Now, again, that was all about Trump going to court to say Clinton, Comey, McCabe, Strzok, Page, all of the usual suspects that you've been hearing about for years now in right-wing media, that all of them had this conspiracy thrown out of court and thrown out of court decidedly.
Yeah, and this judge mentioned the Steele dossier not playing a decisive role in the investigation of Trump and Russia.
Right.
But many people think this is the key to it, right? This is so much that a guy we've discussed here in the past, John Durham, spent over 3 years now trying to prove much of what basically just got thrown out of court, right? But Durham's still at it?
He's still at it. And the reason he's still at it is because John Durham is what's called a special counsel. So he is an assistant U.S. attorney in Connecticut, but he was tapped over 3 years ago to say, we want you to investigate the origins of the Crossfire hurricane investigation, that we think that it was politically motivated. And we think that the FBI was used we're concerned about that. We want you to look into it. So he was tasked over 3 years ago to do that. He did his work for about a year or so in 2019. Then he was tasked with this. And then in October of 2020, just before the 2020 election, he was made a special counsel. Now, here's why that's important. Because that now means that if Trump loses the election in a few weeks, which he did, that Durham will continue. Because sometimes when a new administration comes in, they get new assistant attorneys, U.S. attorneys, and so he might lose his job if there's a new administration that comes in. But if he's made a special counsel, Biden could fire him, or Biden's attorney general. But that would be outside the norm. They haven't done that. And by the way, just keep that in mind. Those of you that think that Trump's not getting a fair shake, this is a special counsel looking into things that were ostensibly done against Trump. And this special counsel has been allowed now for 2 years to continue, almost 2 years, to continue his work under a Democratic administration. But that's why he was made special counsel, so it means he can really go on as long as he wants. Yeah. And his results so far have been pretty abysmal and a huge disappointment to Trumpworld. He indicted a Clinton lawyer last year, but earlier this year, that lawyer was acquitted. So he lost his first really big case on this thing, and that's after he'd been going at it for 2.5 years. Now he has a trial next month against a guy named Igor Danchenko, who turns out to be the source of the information to steal for the Steele dossier. It's this guy, this Igor guy. And there, it turns out, was a longtime Democratic operative, a guy named Dolan, last name Dolan, I'd never heard of. He is apparently the source of information to Igor. So what you got is a Democratic operative giving information to this Igor guy, who's giving it to Christopher Steele, who gave it to the FBI, and it gets out to the news media. And it's negative about Trump. And it has accusations in it about Trump and Russia. So that's important for everybody to know that appears to be true. And so what we said last time we discussed Durham was, here's what he's on to. He's on to political dirty tricks to make an opponent look bad. There's no doubt that happened. It always happens. But what he's trying to show is much more than that. I mean, showing that wouldn't show you honestly anything, because that happens all the time. Okay, people try to find dirt. They hire people to find dirt, to give other people dirt, to give to the news media, to make your opponent look bad. He's trying to show that the machinery of the government was used against Trump. The FBI, the Department of Justice, the deep state. That's what Durham is looking at. It won't be enough for him to just say, hey, this guy was going and giving this information and lying and then making this guy believe it, so he put it in a dossier and gave it to the FBI and all that. So the theory is, if Durham can show that the Steele dossier had political provenance, that's its sourcing, and then show it was used to start an investigation by the Department of Justice into Trump, then we see that the FBI was out to get him and in bed with the Democrats to do it. That's the theory. It failed miserably this week. And there's every reason to believe it's going to fail miserably going forward. Now, Igor may well be convicted of lying to the FBI about being Steele's source, because he's been asked about that. It's my understanding that he denied that. And if that turns out to be untrue, then he's lied to the FBI. He's in trouble. If that happens, then here's what's going to happen. Then Fox is going to do what they did last fall when that lawyer who was later acquitted got indicted. It's the biggest scandal in the history of the country. Don't be fooled. It's not. Hear this. The Russia investigation would have happened if there was never a Steele dossier. It was started independent of that. And any issues with the early months of that investigation are not the same as the Mueller investigation. That didn't start until 2017. Crossfire Hurricane, FBI investigation started in 2016, is not Mueller. And Peter Strzok, some of our listeners know who I'm talking about. This was a guy who worked for the FBI, didn't like Trump. His text messages were discovered where he said a lot of bad things, negative things about Trump. Mueller, when he found out about those text messages, he fired Peter Strzok. Strzok was only on his staff for a few weeks, and then he was fired. So don't mix those up. They're not the same thing. And as I've already said, if the FBI really wanted to sink Trump, it could have simply revealed the existence of the Crossfire Hurricane investigation back in 2016. The FBI investigation into Hillary, in fact, being reopened a couple of weeks before, arguably tipped the election in favor of Trump.
Yeah, the victim and grievance mentality has played itself out for years now. So anything that goes against Trump, like losing the election, this is now proof that whoever they are out to get him. And because so many people, as you said earlier, believe that narrative, that original narrative, that he and his people have been unfairly treated, it's easy to believe that then all these subsequent additional wrongs are being committed, like stealing the election.
Now here they went and stole the election against me. It's the final, coup de grace, So yeah, but remember what we've always said. Trump always says it was stolen when he loses anything. Remember, Iowa caucuses back in 2016 campaign. He lost to Ted Cruz. He said Cruz cheated. But I learned this week, just this week. I had never heard this, that in 2012, he endorsed Mitt Romney. I mean, I knew that. He endorsed Mitt Romney against Obama. Romney lost. He said that Romney was lost, that Obama stole the election against Romney. I had not heard that. So even him endorsing somebody, if he endorses somebody and they lose, then that can't have been on the up and up.
Evidence isn't required. You
No,
can
you
just
don't need it.
lob that out
Lob
there.
it out there. And to get this one, this is the one that really got me, though. I just learned this week that he said the Emmy Awards are rigged because The Apprentice did not win. No. So literally, I mean,
I know you said you've never seen a single episode of that. I have, and it is not
Emmy-worthy.
surprising.
So anything he loses, anything he doesn't win, must be rigged somehow.
So just a couple days ago, wasn't there another Trump associate indicted?
What a week.
Who was that, and what was that
Steve
for?
Bannon. Steve Bannon. The cast of characters, that you surround yourself with. He was investigated in 2020 for a fake called Build the Wall fundraiser, Build the Wall campaign. Well, the wall, the wall, the border of Mexico, right? But it built no wall. The money that came in, millions that came in, but instead lined the pockets of him and his friends. He was being investigated for that in 2020. And on Trump's last day in office, the morning of January 20, 2021, he gave a preemptive pardon to Steve Bannon. So he's just being investigated. He hadn't been indicted. But just in case Steve might get in trouble, he gets a preemptive pardon for that.
You can do that? I mean, is that really, how do you word that document?
Well, he's being investigated for it, so apparently they worded it exactly.
Gotcha.
This investigation.
I was going to say that would be kind of a real big hat.
Oh
tip,
yeah,
or not hat
anything
tip.
he commits ever in the future, he could.
Yeah. What was I going to call it when you telegraph your past?
Yeah.
He's not even being investigated yet, and you you put the people.
I'm not saying
him.
he did anything wrong, but I'm just pardoning him in case. Yeah.
But okay, so he's being investigated
but
already.
Think about this. Think about how horrendous this is. So he's back in the news about that very thing this week. But think about this. Trump pardoned Steve Bannon for the Build the Wall campaign. Who's the money coming from for the Build the Wall campaign? Who are the people giving the money for that?
I think I got emails about that.
I'm sure, I'm sure you did. I didn't. And so I'll give you my secrets about how you can get off.
I'm still registered.
Off of the mailing list. It's Trump supporters, right? Or people that it's people who believe in, that was a big part of Trump's campaign promises, which he didn't get done. Now, he did, to his credit, he had other campaign promises he did keep. Yeah. He wasn't able to keep that one. And here, his friend Steve Bannon is raising money ostensibly in order to build this wall. They're bilking your own people.
Your core, yeah.
And you pardon the guy who's bilking your people. So some might ask, how can he be indicted now if he was pardoned? Well, pardons are only for federal crimes. He was indicted this week in New York for breaking state laws, but for the exact same scam.
Huh.
He can't be pardoned this time. Boy, I hate when that happens. So maybe there'll be some justice for this guy after all.
That would be good. The January 6th committee is going to hold more hearings this month or next.
Yeah.
And what's the status of that?
So there's, the January 6th committee, that's the one in the House of Representatives, and that's the one with Liz Cheney on it.
Yeah, and how does that work? She's not on that.
She'll be on it through January.
Okay.
Or into January. So she's got a few more months. She lost her primary.
Right.
And so she won't be back in Congress as of January. But up until January, she's still a Congresswoman from Wyoming.
Gotcha.
But you still got that. She's still on it. So they've got a few more months. And if, as expected, the Republicans take the House, there will no longer be a January 6th committee. They will dissolve that. So whatever they're going to try to get done, they have to get done in the next few months. But you've got that committee. And then you've got the more important, though. You've got the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice is looking into this. Now, everybody listening, if you're still awake, listen to this. Remember I said that John Durham is still carrying on his work under a Democratic administration. under a Democratic-appointed Attorney General in Merrick Garland. Merrick Garland is overseeing John Durham. John Durham is looking into supposed wrongdoing by Democrats. But the Merrick Garland Justice Department is allowing him to continue doing that, as it should. That's the way this is supposed to go. I only pointed out to say, now the Department of Justice is also looking into crimes committed by Trump and his associates related to the riot and leading up to it on January 6th. The Department of Justice is doing that. Yes, you've got a House committee doing that, and if the House turns over to Republicans, then that committee is going to be dissolved. That's more of a political
I was
function.
going to say that's more informational. Nothing.
Yes, it
they
is.
don't have the ability
That's
to act
correct.
on it anyways.
That's
They can make
correct.
recommendations.
It's the Department of Justice that can take people to court and have them put in jail. See if that continues after an election. See if see what the political branches do to try to slow that down, to try to defund that, to try to muck up the works. We'll see. And then especially if it's in, Lord willing, it'll be done by then, but you never know. It takes a long time. 2024, when you have a new administration, if you get a Republican administration, do they allow that to continue? But the one that's more important among them is the Department of Justice investigation. So here is what we've learned so far, though, from both. From indictments and convictions, tons of them that the Department of Justice has already gotten. People have gone to jail, some of them for years because of the Capitol riot. They keep working their way up to the food chain. But here's what they've both put together. The January 6th committee, as you said, is for, in the House, is for information. But it's giving good information to me, helpful.
Yeah.
So here's the way they've laid it out, I think very helpfully. The plan was, look, we lose the election, it's rigged. And you heard that complaining already. Trump did that when he ran against Hillary. He did the same thing when he ran against Biden. If I lose, it's rigged. I'm not going to accept the results of it if I don't win it. So immediately when the election happens, you have all of this stuff thrown against the wall about, boxes being pulled out of under tables at election precincts in the middle of the night. Remember all those stories, right? So you get all of that going. You get people riled up. That was an orchestrated campaign to make that happen, to get people riled up, then to have individual states based on that withhold their declaration of a winner. We can't declare a winner because there's just too many questions out here. So we can't certify. Well, then let's go to court. Let's go to court and remember all of the courts. Remember release the Kraken and Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani and all people who are now losing their law licenses. Rudy has already lost his because of the shenanigans that he pulled in court and things that he said in court that he could not prove that were not true. All right, that failed spectacularly, the whole court thing. All right, now let's go to legislatures. That's the next step. Go to state legislatures and say, come December, I think it was 13th, when the Electoral College is supposed to meet, the electors from all 50 states on that day are supposed to meet and certify. What we'll do is we will have our own slate of electors. And we will say, we are the true electors from Michigan. So we had people from Michigan sign documents to say, we are the true electors from Michigan. Those people are in a world of hurt. Because they sent that to Washington, D.C. to create this tension now to say, we can't certify the electoral results from a state like Michigan because we got these competing electors. That was the idea. Okay, that failed. So now you're getting into later December, you're getting into early January, you only got a few weeks left of the Trump administration. So now you're going to have to go to the Justice Department itself, the Justice Department. We're going to have to get the Attorney General to say, hey, there are problems with this election and we are going to have to investigate this. Just throw it into turmoil. Trump tells William Barr, who was his Attorney General, look, you got to get out there and say this. Barr refuses. Now, Barr had run interference for Trump on. He did it on the Mueller report. He said no. In fact, he went out publicly and said, we don't have any evidence to that fact. Trump went crazy. December 23rd, Barr resigns. So now you've just got a few weeks left of administration and you don't have an Attorney General. You've got a Deputy Attorney General who will then be the acting Attorney General. Trump says, I want you to do this. Guy says no. Got the next guy. He says, no. January 4th, they have a meeting in the Oval Office. And they got the environmental lawyer, a guy named Jeffrey Clark.
We talked about this.
They found this guy. And these other two guys are telling him, he's saying, yeah, I'll do it. Make me the attorney general, I'll do it. They say, hey, why don't you go back to your environmental stuff? If we have an oil spill, we'll call you. That's what they say to him. They were ticked at this guy. And they said to Trump, you do this, everybody's walking out of it en masse. And so, but that was the attempt, okay? All right, that fails. January 6th.
A lot to be thankful for in these
Holy
individuals saying,
oh my goodness,
that's not right.
Can't do it. January 6th, then, okay, we're going to force the issue. We're going to put physical pressure. I mean, when I say physical, violence. We're going to make you do this. Mike Pence, you're going to do this, you know? And so they run for their lives, and we all know the story. And then that fails. And then they certify the election. And then what people don't know is you still got 2 weeks left. You got the Department of Defense. He's trying to get the Department of Defense involved. There's talk about martial law and seizing voting machines. Thankfully, as you say, enough people stood up and said, no, we can't do that. Here we are.
Yeah, it really is amazing. And you've said it before. And the more I've learned about it, the more I realize how on the head your comments were. Just a hair's distance away from everything, the wheels falling off.
Yeah. And we'll have occasion, I'm done, this has gone long enough, but we will have occasion because of the elections coming up, and especially in 2024. My concern is this. We came really close to losing it. We came very close to losing it. If some people didn't stand up. What's happening now is in many states, you're getting people put in place who won't take that stand.
Right.
So next time you have a rerun of this, it may well turn out quite differently. So we need to pray about that.
Yeah, and that's for the reason we said at the beginning, because we want to live quiet and peaceable lives. We want the order of our system that has been a great environment in which to give the gospel for a couple centuries now.
Yes.
We want that to persist.
Right.
So hope this was helpful to you as it was to me. Talk about these updates to these events we've discussed in the past. And we are doing these episodes every month. We do them on the second Saturday of the month. And if you don't already subscribe to our channel, hit that subscription button just below this video and hit the notification bell as well so you know when our new episodes come out. We'll look forward to seeing you in the next one. If you have a question you'd like us to consider, you can send that in to our email address, info@cbctrenton.com, or text it to us at 97000.